Excerpt from Satirical History of Tennessee. New all too true blue alternative state histories. Time immemorial, mastodon discovered. Some while back, a mastodon was discovered in Tennessee. Well, a dead one. Nobody knows how it got there from Jurassic Park. At first, some thought it was a hoax made of papier-mâché, perhaps a practical joke perpetrated by some slack-jawed miscreant or reprobate. However, scientists soon verified the authenticity of the find. Well, except for one particular. Although the specimen was first identified as a mastodon, it turned out the old fossil was a she, not a he. I figured this out because it lied about its age. Thus, it was proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that this was not a mastodon, but a mastodona. Rich Valens later wrote a song about her. She is the third one from the left, in the picture below, the one looking at the camera and asking if her winter coat makes her look fat. 1540, Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto. Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto really got around. In 1540, he made it into Tennessee, as he was tired of wearing his blazing hot metal helmet and wanted to trade it in for a lighter and, in both senses of the word, cooler coonskin cap. Here he is, on the lookout for one, asking directions from some friendly neighborhood Indians on how to get to David Crockett's place. 1775, Boone blazes the Wilderness Trail to Tennessee. In 1775, Daniel Boone blazed a trail through the wilderness, imaginatively named the Wilderness Trail, which stretched from Virginia to Tennessee. To blaze a trail means one of two things. Either you ride a horse named Blaze and let it find its own way, or you start a forest fire and then you can see better without all the trees in the way. Boone didn't have a horse named Blaze. This is what the area looked like after the trees had grown back. 1784, State of Franklin formed. In 1784, some rabble-rousers in East Tennessee formed a state from their holdings and named it Franklin. It was named for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This lasted only until 1789, though, when that region was moved by a convoy of helicopters to Wawa, Pennsylvania, and turned into a mint. Some people were of the opinion that the state should not have been named Franklin in the first place, but rather Eleanor. Here are some who held that opinion. These women refused to boil any more eggs or shirts until the name of the state was changed from Franklin to Eleanor. Soon thereafter, the whirlybirds appeared. 1812, New Madrid earthquake. Real Foot Lake formed. In 1812, the New Madrid earthquake formed Real Foot Lake in Tennessee. After 2 centuries, it's still there. The scattergraph below, made by a third grader using an Etch-a-Sketch, shows the areas affected by the earthquake. Each red mark indicates a spot where somebody got real scared, not just a little bit scared, when the earthquake occurred. As you can tell, Tennesseans, stalwarts though they be, volunteered to be scared in a large section of the state, ranging from the Kentucky border in the north down to Memphis, which is near Egypt. 1819, Tennessee man discovers Yosemite. A Tennessee mountain man named Joe Walker discovered Yosemite in 1819. No, it wasn't John Muir, nor was it Teddy Roosevelt. It was Joe Walker. Walker lived up to his name by hoofing it all the way to the Pacific. True, he did not really discover Yosemite, as deer and bear and Indians had seen it before him, but since they couldn't vote, they didn't count. This is what Walker saw when he walked up to the edge of the mountaintop. 1836, Crockett at the Alamo. Being a country boy, David Crockett had a lot of hound dogs. Busy as he was, being a Tennessee congressman, Crockett got to the point where he didn't have time to be out shooting game for his hounds all the time, so he started buying his dog chow wholesale from the stores to save a little money. They paid congressmen less back then. So, in 1836, David Crockett went to the Alamo to buy several wagon loads of dog chow. Happy to have such a famous person endorse their product, the Alamo people appointed Davy their unofficial spokesman, with a consideration paid him under the table and, of course, free dog food for life. The Alamo has been famous ever since. It was a win-win proposition. Here's old Davy and the 10 duds reacting when some other dog lovers claimed that Purina produced a better brand of dog chow. This was after the aforementioned deal was struck, of course. 1838 and 1839, Trail of Tears. In 1838 and 1839, several native Tennesseans hit the jackpot, so to speak, when they were given free tickets to Indian Territory. Almost 17,000 Cherokee gladly departed East Tennessee for the Indian Territory, which they called the Promised Land, during this period of time. You can deduce from the map below that the Cherokee left Tennessee by land, by sea, water, and apparently by hovercraft, called Other in the map, but there were no airplanes in, so it had to be by hovercraft, based on process of elimination. 1864, Fort Pillow-Macascree. In 1864, near the town of Hennin, while others were engaged in the Civil War, the mother of all pillow fights took place, going down in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most hilarious hijinks ever engaged in by grown men. Hundreds of them chose sides and began whacking each other with and throwing pillows around willy-nilly until the air was completely choked with eiderdown. You couldn't see a foot in front of you. There were so many feathers falling and floating through the atmosphere. Berated for their childish play, the local wise guy drew this depiction of the pillow fight as an actual battle, thus calming the nerves of a disturbed nation. 1918, Alvin York's WW1 antics. It is believed that Mark Twain, although born in Florida, Missouri that is, was conceived in Pall Mall, Tennessee. Alvin York was born in Pall Mall a little over half a century later in 1887. In 1918, a year after the United States got directly involved in World War I, called the Great War at the time, Alvin formed a doo-wop vocal group called the Chipmunks and served as their lead singer and frontman. Unable to break into the top 10, Alvin thought of a gimmick to draw attention to the band. This was his plan. He set out to break the world record for eating peppermint patties. At first, the thought of doing this bothered his conscience because he considered it gluttony to eat that many mint patties, especially all in one sitting. After discussing it with his bandmates, though, they talked him into gluttonizing for glory, as they put it, in spite of his misgivings. So it was that Alvin York ate 132 peppermint patties, assuring lasting fame for himself and his bandmates. Similar to the pillow fighters near Hennin, the band's manager considered this feat somewhat tame and so paid an artist to paint a picture of York in battle with Germans, rather than him besting the other peppermint patty contestants. 1925, Scopes Trial. In 1925, the famous Scopes Trial took place. This was when a high school teacher was summoned to court by a class action suit filed by several of his pupils, who claimed he had really bad breath, so revolting that some referred to it as monkey breath. That was one thing, but what got both their ire and their dander up was that he refused to even attempt to do anything to alleviate the localized classroom air pollution. The kids won, and the teacher was thereafter required to gargle with scope 3 times a day, while school kept. Depicted below is the inconsiderate teacher on the day of the big court decision. The teacher, Mr. Perdue, is on the left, with his lawyer on the right. You can see the lawyer is deliberately keeping his distance and fouling the air with a cigarette to camouflage the halitosis cloud drifting his way. 1925, Grand Ole Opry begins broadcasting. The Grand Ole Opry began broadcasting in 1925. Contrary to popular opinion, to broadcast is not to hurl women around. To broadcast means to disseminate seeds. In this case, the Grand Ole Opry, also known as Ryman Auditorium, disseminates the seeds of appreciation for Spanish culture. Spanish culture consists of bullfighting, red wine, and bullfighting. The Grand Ole Opry is where Spanish bullfight opera music is both taught and performed. Spanish bullfight opera music is the last thing pierced bulls in the bullfighting arena hear. It is also the last thing pierced bullfighters in the bullfighting arena hear. By the way, the Grand Ole Opry is Herb Alpert's alma mater. Below, you can see Hello Kitty Wells at the Grand Ole Opry. Though she had really wanted to play Matt Dillon's love interest on the television show Gunsmoke, her grandfather H.G., as well as her father Orson, pressured her to go into the family business of bullfight opera singing. 1927, Jimmy Rogers recorded. In Bristol, where Bristol cream was invented, in 1927, Jimmy Rogers was recorded singing some songs while strumming his guitar and wearing his railroading duds. Prior to entering the studio, Rogers had been working on a railroad, all the livelong day, in fact. People called him the singing brakeman. This was because he was always taking breaks. Smoke breaks, 5-minute break, 10-minute break, you name it. The Carter family were also recorded in Bristol. Jimmy and Rosalind were passable singers, but it was Lillian, Billy, and Amy who really shined. Their rendition of Wildwood Peanut sent the listeners into raptures of ecstasy and shivers down their collective spines. Women swooned, and some porkers outside who heard the music started excitedly rooting around the ground, searching for goobers, which demonstrates the power of subliminal advertising. The Carters eventually faded into obscurity, but Jimmy Rogers lives on because he became the grandfather of Paul Rogers, lead singer of Bad Company. That crooner in turn became the grandfather of Aaron Rodgers, who turned his back on his musical roots and became a pitchman for a county poor farm. After yodeling his way to international fame, Jimmy 86 the railroad togs and got gussied up in a white suit, sans pink carnation or crustacean. 1933, TVA created. The TVA was created in 1933. The TVA, for those who are not in the know, is the Tennessee Volunteer Authority. The TVA tells every Tennessee volunteer what to do. They are the authority, and they make everybody volunteer, so what's a fellow to do? As an example of their arbitrariness and bossiness, here's a man who had been content to work in his turnip patch, but they volunteered him to poke a hole in the top of a mountain with a jail hammer. A jail hammer is the politically correct version of a jackhammer. Since every action causes an equal and opposite reaction, as he is poking a hole in the top of the mountain in the foreground, the mountain in the far distance is responding by blowing out a puff of toxic dust. 1942 to 1946, Manhattan Project in Oak Ridge. From 1942 to 1946, the Manhattan Project practiced their songs in Oak Ridge. Jazz musicians such as Wayne Toller, Morgan Stanley, Stan Laurel, and Stan Lee spent over 40 years perfecting their eponymously titled album. And you thought the Eagles took their time. On privacy, the Manhattan Project chose this location in the backwoods of Tennessee, where nobody would expect to find them, and therefore nobody would look for them. While their fans were searching all over Manhattan for them, both the one in New York and the more famous one in Kansas, there they were, holed up in an obscure ridge in mountainous Tennessee, sharpening their axes, working on their chops, and honing their skis. The picture below, stealthily taken by a drone pilot sitting in his mother's basement in Jenny Lane, California, shows the neighborhood where the Manhattan Project practiced. You can't actually see the house the Manhattan Project rented because it's hidden in the middle of the forest in the northwest corner of the picture. Legend has it that this is the same forest that Little Red Riding Hood used to traverse on her way to her grandmother's house. 1968, Martin Luther in Memphis. In 1968, excommunicated German cleric Martin Luther was arrested in Memphis for vagrancy. Although it was assumed that the Pope had something to do with this, it was never proven. It is true, though, that the Pope had a burr in his saddle, so to speak, over Luther advising the portly old buzzard to go on a diet of worms. Luther told the Pope that if he would just eat 95 worms a day, he would soon be down to a svelte, for him, 200 pounds. Enraged, the Pope had demanded of Luther, "Are you calling me fat?" Luther calmly replied, "I can do no other than advise you as I see fit, and I think you should get fit. So, which will it be, fit or fat?" The Pope had Luther's sword confiscated, broken in half, and thrown over the wall. Luther was rebuked and dismissed, and he had to trudge on home, swordless. Here's Martin Luther, front and center, with some of his pals, and a sign in the back reading, "Hey, Pope, eat worms now." His advisor, to the right in the picture, but on Luther's left, is trying to soften a suggestion painted on the sign by telling him, "Tell the Pope he can make it gummy worms if he can't stand real, squiggly worms."